gets one beat, then how many beats does a half note get? What do you think, Evan?
Wow, Evan, how come you can't answer a simple question like this? Sometimes you're no better than a sack of...
Nelson, be kind to Evan. Sometimes he has difficulty understanding the questions I ask him because he doesn't process the words I say as quickly as you can.
What does that even mean? That sounds stupid.
Well, Nelson, Evan has a hearing processing disorder. That means that he has a disability relating to the inability to process and comprehend the information taken in by the ear. Simply put, he has difficulty processing noises related to speech.
Exactly. It's not that I don't understand the answer, it just takes me a lot longer to understand the question. Nelson, you thought that I zoned out when I actually was trying to comprehend what Miss O'Neill was asking before answering.
I guess that makes sense. So you have a tough time learning things because your brain is slower than other people.
Actually, that's not really it at all. Mrs. O'Neill, can you please explain the differences between my auditory processing disorder and the other cognitive disorders?
Sure thing, Evan. Look here, Nelson. Your statement would lead one to believe that auditory processing disorders affect the entire brain, when that actually isn't true at all.
So if it doesn't affect the entire brain, what does it affect?
Now that's an excellent question. Auditory processing disorders primarily affect the parts of the brain having to do with understanding of speech and sounds. It's not that Evan cannot understand, it's just that his brain struggles to discriminate between certain syllables as well as speech and background noise. The ears hear just fine, but the brain confuses the information the ears transmit.
Exactly! For instance, when Mrs. O'Neill asked how many beats a half note gets, I knew the answer was 2. I just had to figure out what words she was saying to know exactly what the question was. This disability has made school very difficult for me. When I first came here, I, just like everyone, wanted to make as many friends as possible. Unfortunately, because many people don't really understand what I go through, they think it's better just to leave me alone. So while everyone else plays with their friends, I don't really have anyone to play with. To make matters worse, school is difficult for me too. Math and reading came pretty easy for the rest of our class, but for me, it was very difficult to learn. My parents had to help me a lot in order to finally catch on to these topics, but this added extra stress because as I struggled, so did they. They get frustrated with me as they have to repeat themselves a lot and I still miss what they are saying or how to do something. And so sometimes I wouldn't even tell them about my homework so that they wouldn't have to help at all. This added unnecessary stress to my life, but I can't really do anything about it.
Wow, I never realized that this affected every part of your life like that. But I still don't really understand how it can be so difficult for you to understand all of these things.
Take a look at this video I found, Nelson. It will actually show us what it's like to have an auditory processing disorder just like Evan.
There was a boy named Jack and a girl named Jill. They were both brother and sister. They were both instructed by their parents to get some milk at the market since they ran out this morning from eating cereal. Jill put on her blue coat as Jack got his hat. Jack was all ready to go, but was not three pairs of shoes to wear. Eventually she decided and off they began their adventure to the market. Along the way, the dog street and immediately unstead it. Knowing well that they needed to be home soon before it got too dark out, he left alone. Jack and says, "Wow, that's a little." Jill comments, "Yeah, I could just grab one and eat it." They finally made it to their time for supper and at the dinner parents about their small adventure to the market.
Okay, Nelson, were you able to answer all the questions at the end correctly?
No way. That was way too difficult. How could I understand the story with all that noise in the background?
That's exactly the point, Nelson. You got frustrated watching the short video, but that's exactly what Evan experiences all the time.
Wow. I guess I didn't really realize that. How can I help people like Evan with auditory processing disorder?
I'm glad you asked. There are so many ways we can help a student like Evan. One of the first things we try to do is create a quiet work environment where Evan can be free of background noise. That's why I'm so strict when it comes to talking while I'm teaching. We also let Evan sit at the front of the class so that he's away from the air conditioner and windows where additional noise pollutants come from.
I also wear this headphone during class, but they don't play music like you might expect. These headphones are actually part of an assisted listening device which picks up the voice of my teachers teaching so I can hear their voices loud and clear.
I also make sure to check in with Evan frequently during class to make sure he's understanding what we're working on. That's actually why I asked him the question in the first place.
That's also why I leave the room during all of our big tests. It helps me to have extra time on these tests and to be isolated even more from unnecessary background noises.
That's really cool. I honestly never noticed any of those things.
So Nelson, do you finally see what it's like for Evan to have an auditory processing disorder?
I do. An auditory processing disorder doesn't affect Evan's ability to hear things or even know what they mean. It just means that his brain doesn't handle the incoming noises very well, making it seem like all the sounds are jumbled together. This has caused Evan a lot of stress, as school is more difficult for him and people tend to get tired of being around him. His parents struggle to work with him because it's difficult for him to learn, and school is hard because not everyone understands what he goes through. This is even tougher because he doesn't have friends to fall back on, and he's had to deal with all this on his own for so long. Well, here's the thing, Evan, I want to be your friend.
That's great, Nelson.
But there's one thing I still want to know. What are some ways that I can help make a difference in the lives of people like Evan?
Well, Nelson, we'll have to save that for another lesson. It's about time we get back to learning music. If you would like to discover more on your own, check out some of the sources listed next. Many of them list all kinds of ways teachers, friends, and families can accommodate students with auditory processing disorders.